I've always been a huge fan of small game developers and indie games in general, but no other game has spoken to me like the 2018 release Celeste. And at first glance, this game might seem like just another simple platformer, but there is a beauty to Celeste that you don't really get at first glance, or until you beat the game for that matter. So I'd like to dive into this game and talk about why it's so great, the messages and themes surrounding the game, and also why you should play it. First off, I want to give huge props to the developers for this game. It is an incredibly small team over at Extremely OK Games, and I want to say their staff only has about 5 people. I do think quite a bit more worked on this game, but the original staff was 5 or 6. Despite being such a small company, this game was a huge success and it sold about 500,000 copies, well exceeding expectations. It even won a few awards in 2018, such as the Best Independent Production and the Biggest Impact Award, which is quite a feat. So let's get to the actual game. It's basically a traditional platformer with the ability to double jump, and the double jump is refreshed every time you touch the ground. As the game goes on, more and more features are added, making each level extra unique. The coolest ones in my opinion were the space foam thing and the feather in the last few levels. Each level has interesting puzzles that can be solved in different ways, as well as loads of side content and optional challenges. This game is just very challenging in general, especially the B-sides to each level, which can be unlocked in the main level. Despite the challenge, with enough practice you can eventually accomplish anything in this game. The soundtrack to this game is also incredible. It's written and performed by one woman from Extremely OK Games named Lana Rain. She captures the beauty and melancholy nature of this game perfectly. Just listen to the beginning of the track, Awake. Each level has its own interesting and unique theme that perfectly matches the slow tone shift of the game. As the stakes increase and the difficulty increases, the music also becomes more intense and captivating. This game also has a beautiful art style. It's simplistic and reminiscent of retro games, but when this game wants to shine, it really shines. Some of the background shots you see specifically with the later levels are really well made and captivate the player. The game also has a handful of boss fights that are all unique and challenging in their own way, and they definitely aren't the focus, but when they are there, they're really well designed. As far as I'm concerned, everything that I've talked about so far would make this game pretty great, but what elevates it to the next level? What brings a simple, short platformer to the likes of Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, and other quote-unquote best video games of all time? The story of this game is simple. There aren't that many characters, there isn't much plot to be described. In fact, if I just talked about the plot, it wouldn't sound that impressive. To convey the emotions that come with playing this game is strange, but it's one I have to attempt if you truly want to know why you should play this game. To start off, you play as Madeline, a short-tempered young woman who wants to climb a mountain. And to some degree, that's it. That's a story. The only conflict being what Madeline can and can't accomplish, and what you, the player, can and can't accomplish. The mountain isn't regular by any means. It isn't haunted, but like the older woman in the beginning describes it, Celeste Mountain is a strange place. You might see things you aren't ready to see. Following that conversation, the journey begins, and during the first level you meet your one and fellow traveler, Theo. Theo is very welcoming and positive towards Madeline. He's always around a campfire pretty much and just has a very safe vibe around him, and based on their first conversation you can tell that Madeline isn't very sure of herself and describes her goal of climbing the mountain as just something she, quote, needs to do. She explains that she needs to get her mind off things back home and is climbing the mountain to do just that. It isn't very far into the game when something really strange happens, and when I first saw this I was very caught off guard. During the second level of the game, Madeline starts to have a panic attack, and a sort of dark Madeline appears that follows you through the rest of the level. For a while, this dark Madeline only causes problems and just feeds into Madeline's insecurities, telling her to turn back and makes her doubt herself even more than she already does. The game is really trying to convince you that Dark Madeline is the antagonist and the physical embodiment of all of Madeline's flaws. She constantly sets back Madeline as she gets closer and closer to her goal, and she keeps having panic attacks that get worse and worse, and this isn't heightened until the Mirror Temple level, where Theo and Madeline get separated for the first time. This level is the first time a physical enemy is introduced, which is described as being the physical embodiment of Madeline's fear and lack of confidence. Despite this, Madeline and Theo persevere and continue on their way to the summit. But during the journey, Dark Madeline keeps showing up and becomes more and more aggressive and causes larger and larger problems. For the entire game, Madeline rejects Dark Madeline's point of view and sees her as a sort of evil she needs to get rid of. Instead of something she has to face, she is constantly running away instead of addressing the problem. That isn't until Dark Madeline's boss fight. This is one of the more interesting points in the game because for the first time in the game you aren't running away. You're not escaping from some monster, you're actually the one doing the chasing. And even more interesting is that she is visibly terrified of you, just as terrified as you have been for the entire game. This is a huge turning point in the game because for the first time Madeline is confronting her mental health issues. It isn't until Madeline embraces her flaws and insecurities that she can reach the top of Mount Celeste. For the first half of the game, Madeline rejects this complete half of herself and continues to tell herself that she doesn't need this other half, which is the culmination of her flaws. But the fact is, no one is perfect, and everyone has issues. Why not embrace them head on instead of running away? Understand yourself so that you can better yourself instead of the other way around. And if you really need to, go climb your own version of Mount Celeste. Something that helps you prove to yourself that you can do anything you set your mind to, despite having flaws and being human. We all have a part of ourselves that we are too scared to confront, but maybe while being the hardest thing to do, it's the right thing to do. Celeste is beautiful. It maintains the quality of an incredible platformer while also challenging the player with their own identity. It isn't forced and it's written really well. There aren't many games that are as personal as Celeste, but this game truly breaks the boundaries of storytelling in video games and is one of the most interesting games ever made. I've seen countless people talk about how Celeste helped them or spoke to them on a deeper level than you might think. And when a game accomplishes that and speaks to the player on a personal level, it truly becomes a masterpiece. And there isn't a word that describes Celeste better. Thanks for watching.